Nothing else you do can create that level of currency for your business than building your reputation. If you launch in Japan and it doesn't work, you're never going back to Japan. The minute that you say there's a change, the mind of the person that you're talking to goes to, how's that going to impact me? Being niche and kind of seeing where can you stand out is a better way to start than trying to be something for everyone. If you did things right from the beginning and you built that reputation and that brand, when you did have a crisis, they would give you the benefit of the doubt. What can only I do?
With a proper reputation and branding, startups can achieve a new level of success. Today, we have an expert in reputation and branding, Bonnie Caver. She usually consults and helps CFOs and CEOs of bigger corporations to improve their reputation and branding. She has over 20 years of experience, and today she will share her learnings and lessons with you.
I really want to change that feeling of reputation management because it's really about creating and building a reputation for what you want to be known for. So if you were to start your company and you were to say, what do I want everyone to say about me? What do I want to be known for? That's your reputation. And yes, you're going to manage your reputation and guide it and create it, but it's a lot more than managing, right? And so it's about what are the things you're going to do strategically to create and build a reputation over the life of your company. We don't often work with startups, but it's kind of a nice thing to get to talk to startups because you have a clean slate. You have an idea, you have a product, you're going to change the world in some way. You've decided that there's a market for what you have and your idea, or if you've got your product already up and running. But reality is no one knows about you. And if no one knows about you, they can't buy from you. How you tell your story and how you build your company is the reputation you're going to have in the marketplace. And we talk about that from being this brand that you create of how you do what you say and how you create this brand promise that you deliver on and how you create a culture that can deliver on that brand. And so there's a lot of things that we'll put into that and we can unpack them. But that's really what we're trying to do. And when we think that when you have worked very hard in building a reputation for your organization, it's currency. There's nothing else you can do that will increase the level that people will buy from you, that they'll recommend you, that they'll work for you, that they'll invest in you. Nothing else you do can create that level of currency for your business than building your reputation.
If you compare the same kind of company startup that is doing a really good job with branding and reputation and another one that doesn't care much and just leave it organically, how would those companies to compare to each other?
I think the company that has the reputation is going to accelerate. There's a company that actually measures this called RepTrack. And RepTrack over the years has looked at the global 100 of the top reputable companies in the world. And they've aligned that to performance. And their performance is much better than companies that aren't on the RepTrack. So there's some proof through their research that there's a huge opportunity for organizations that are focused on that. I also think that when you focus on your reputation, and it's not, I'm just going to focus on reputation. It's just about how you're creating your business from the beginning. And when you focus that, then you are able to understand where you differentiate, what the storylines you need to tell, what are the proof points you need to tell that are actually telling the story of your company and are delivering on that brand promise much faster than your competitor. I see very often that there's a difference in companies and how fast they accelerate from when you talk to them and they're first trying to get some funding, and they come out and they say, I have an idea, and I think my idea will do this. They may or may not get funding. It depends on how good the idea is. That second level is, I have a product that does this. We list all our feature sets, and we try to sell on features, and we'll put comparisons. So we'll have our competitors' features and our features, and do those features even matter? But that's the way we've learned to kind of sell at that second level. When you're beginning to think about reputation, you say, I have a product that's going to change the world. It's going to impact you. It's going to change the way you think about X. It's going to change the way you do this. It's going to save you X amount of time. And that's when you're beginning to tell a story and beginning to deliver on a reputation. And the quicker we can get organizations to that, the more likely they are to get funding, the more they're going to accelerate. They can tell their story. And you can see it. You can go to websites where they've got case studies and their clients are testimonials, etc., saying, my life changed tremendously when I started using this product, or it saved my company X amount of dollars. The quicker you can get to that versus going to websites where you see, this is what the client's offerings are, and this is what our offerings are. And you may have 2 lines that are yours that aren't theirs, but do those lines even matter? Oh, that kind of thing. So the quicker you can get out of the feature function and to the impact, the better.
Yeah, I see it over and over with websites and marketing. They are talking about how experienced they are. Our company is 120 years old. Okay, what does it mean for me? I don't know. What do you do if a client comes to you? How does your process look like for reputation building?
First of all, we want to look at their brand and how developed is their brand, and do they know their brand messaging? Do they know what they stand for in the marketplace? Do they know their differentiation? What kind of research they've done? What do their clients say about them? What do their employees say? And so sometimes we may, especially for young companies, we may create a soft brand. And when I talk about brand, I'm talking about creating something that is a living brand. And organizations, so often they think of brand as the logo, especially startups, right? You're talking to a new CEO and he's, yeah, I've got my website. I've got my brand done. I've got my website. I know my colors. I've got this really cool logo. I'm good. My brand's done. But when we talk about brand, I think often of Seth Godin and his conversation that the brand is more than a cowboy hat. Basically, it takes more than a cowboy hat to make you a cowboy. So if you just think about that, I love that being in Texas. We all come to Texas and you get your boots and you get your cowboy hat. But that's not the same as the guy that's out here riding his horse, herding his cattle, right? That's a cowboy. It's about how you live and how you live your brand. And when you create a brand, you're looking at communication, you're looking at the culture you're building, at the kind of connections you have with your stakeholders. And stakeholders are more than just your customers. Stakeholders can be your employees, they can be your investors, they can be your potential clients, they can be regulatory entities. All of these people that you need to be communicating with and to telling your story, these are your stakeholders. So how are you building a culture? How are you communicating through that culture? And how are you connecting with those stakeholders? And we call that your living brand. So when you have your brand plus this communication, culture, and connections, you have a living brand. When you have a living brand, then you can make decisions on that, right? You make decisions on, what are my stakeholders going to think when I decide to add this? Am I ready to add this feature? And even things like, I'm going to step out and advocate for something. What do my stakeholders think about that? Are they aligned? What do my employees think about that? If I'm going to step out and say, we're going to launch this new product or this new line of our product, but our current product isn't working very well, then you're just further eroding your reputation before you fix the piece that's not working. When you have a culture that's not aligned to where you're going, when your employees don't understand where you're going, you're not communicating with them, you're not bringing them along. I see this very often when you go to that second level. So when you first start up, you have 5 people and 3 are the founders. And then you hire your first 2 employees, depending on what you're doing. They could be the hostess at your restaurant. They could be a chef, or in technology, they are probably your systems engineer or something like that. When you first start to hire those, everybody knows the path. Everybody knows the roadmap. And when you need to change the roadmap, you change it really quickly because there's just 5 of you in the car. Think of it as a road trip, right? If you like to travel and you're all in the car and there's 5 of you in the car and everybody says, I need to stop and go to the bathroom. It's easy, right? Or if you're saying, let's go to this little town because it looks fun. We don't have to be to our hotel till late tonight. It's easy for you to make that decision when there's 5 of you. But think about when you have a whole convoy of cars and you're having to communicate with each of those convoy of cars to say, we're going to stop up here. And then as that gets longer and longer, they get on a longer bus, they're in a train, they're in multiple boats. I mean, just think, they're in multiple cities, multiple countries. But the better you can make that process and that brand and that communication and that culture work each time you add a train, each time you add a car on your trip, the more you can make that work as you're growing, the better it will work when you become a company of 250 or 500 or 1,000. But you have to put that in place at the beginning. And it's hard to do when you think of there's just 5 of us and we don't have a lot of funding. But sometimes you should sit around and not just think about the product, but what's it going to look like when we're big? It's a dreaming thing. But it's also, what are we going to look like when we're big? But what are the problems we're going to have and the challenges we're going to have because of the way we're building it here today?
I think many startups, are stuck in this being too small. They're too successful to die, maybe,
Right.
but they are not successful enough to be a proper company that has enough delegation, that is not relying on only one or a couple people. Those startups, they are a lot of work for the entrepreneur and a lot of risk. So to reach the next level, they need to build a reputation, not only for clients, but also for employees and freelancers.
And once you begin to build that reputation, then it's currency and it's important. And now you have to protect it. And that's that you talk about risk, that's looking at those risks. And it's not just the risk that you're looking at in your finances. The CFO or your accountant, they'll look at risk and they'll look at financial risk and they'll make decisions of how you grow based on your risk. But there's also reputational risk. When we make this decision, when we launch this product that's kind of half-baked, and we're basically going to use our clients as guinea pigs to see if it's a good thing, that's not a good reputational risk. But then some organizations have higher risk tolerance than others. Sometimes higher risk allows you to get ahead quicker. You have to be risky in order to go do this new thing. So some entrepreneurs have a higher risk tolerance. If you're a little more funded, you might have a higher risk tolerance than if it's your money. It's your hard-earned savings that you've decided to take away your retirement or to mortgage your house or whatever those things that many entrepreneurs do, then your risk tolerance may be a little less than if you're spending someone else's money. Sometimes that's the case. And sometimes funders want you to be risky and they're willing for you to be risky because they know there's an opportunity there. But you want to be sure that the risks that you're taking are calculated risks, not only those that your CFO is looking at, but also the reputation. You don't want to burn the bridges with your stakeholders because it's very hard to get that back. And that's one of the things I really look at from a culture perspective around the world If you're in the US and you launch a product that's not working perfectly, there's a lot of tolerance here. Okay, we'll wait till they send a new update. If I'm looking at my iPhone and I know that 14.0 or 18, I think we're up to 18. The first 18.0 might have some bugs in it, but that's okay because I kind of like the phone. I like the features. They're going to send me an update. We have that tolerance here, right? When you are a new product and you have no loyalty, no brand, and I try it and it doesn't work, I don't ever come back. And that is more so in other countries than it even is in the US. We've worked with clients that are launching products all over the world. If you launch in Japan and it doesn't work, you're never going back to Japan. You need to change the company name, the leaders, everything else, because they just do not have tolerance there that maybe we do in the US.
It seems like a big decision to make for founders to decide on how they want to be positioned. How difficult is it to change like the position, the branding?
When you're young, a young company, not so hard, right? As you begin to tell your story, you can swizzle it some, you can change a little bit. The things that cause you challenges begin to be around your workplace. When you have loyal customers, you can still change, but you have to bring them along with you. You have to get them to buy into your strategic vision. You have to get them to buy into why the organizational structure is changing. You have to get them to buy in and understand and listen to their perceptions. And when you make a change, you have to bring them along, right? Back to RepTrack measures in 7 dimensions, and we look at those 7 dimensions of reputation. And I said earlier, you're not even in the reputation game when your products and services aren't good. If you don't have good products and services, you're not there. But then they look at innovation, like, are you continuing to innovate? Are you continuing to improve on those products and services? What's your financial performance? Are you a strong company? Am I going to buy from you and in 6 months you're not going to be here anymore? That kind of plays into it. But then you also are getting into workplace. Is this a good place to work? Do people like to come to work here? Are they delivering on what you're offering? Are they delivering on the brand promise? Are you doing things good by governance and laws? Do you abide by governance and laws? This is going to be a big thing in the AI world as we go into AI. What is our conduct in the marketplace and how are we implementing responsible AI? Then you're looking at citizenship. Are you engaged in your communities? Are you a good corporate citizen? What's your purpose of your company? Do you have a broader purpose than just to make money? And then what's the leadership like? And is it a trusted leadership? Is it a transparent leadership? Is it empathetic and authentic? Those are the things that kind of make up those dimensions of reputation. And the bigger you get, the more you're going to develop each one of those. At the beginning, you're just focused on your products and services and building a good workplace, having good performance, showing innovation. But those changes, you have to bring along people. You have to bring those stakeholders along. And you have to know who your stakeholders are. Most of the time, they're like, oh, we'll just talk to our customers. But they didn't talk to their employees. And so the customers know something that the employees don't know. Or you're not giving the employees the opportunity to change. The other thing is, what kind of brand are you building? It depends on the culture you're building as well. So, am I a great place to work? I care about my employees. We have great work-life balance. We pay well. We do a lot of fun things together. It's a happy place to work, that kind of thing. Then there's the other side of, we're here to win. We're going to go get the A players. If you're not an A player, you probably won't make it here. We work hard here, but our clients want to win and we want to win. So we're really about this. You may have a brand that's a sage brand. Founders are all PhDs and people who've worked at large corporations and been very, very successful. And so they've got a higher purpose. They're going to change something in the world. They're going to do something very purposeful. Then they need employees that are at their level, who've been in the marketplace before, who've seen companies grow before. So they're building a culture that would be a little more sage, and this is the way you should go. These are thought leaders. So you want to hire people and build a culture of thought leadership. So it really depends. Those are just 3 examples of cultures, right? If you're a caregiver kind of brand. So you need to decide what that is going to be like, because that depends on the people you hire. That's a conversation you have with people. You're great, but you might not like it here because you have a family. And we're not saying that you wouldn't be here, but we're expecting you to work 80 hours a week. And it's going to be challenging work and fun work. But, you've got to be ready to be part of that culture.
Yeah, you attract the right kind of people, those who are not a good fit. If you have the strong culture in your company, they will not like it and they will not stay it. So it's a self-fulfilling prophecy, and it automatically filters out the wrong, like not bad, but not suitable people from your team. Should you, as a company owner or CEO, prioritize different stakeholders?
Yes. And you'll prioritize them based on what story you need to tell and where you need to go. I think your employees are always a priority. The last thing you need, and timing can be different, and depending on how many employees you have and what level of employees you have. But you don't want someone picking up the phone and calling your office asking about something that was announced and your employees don't know about it. That does not work. Secondly, you've got to trust your employees to help guide you through whatever the change might be. I think of crisis sometimes. The first people we talk to in a crisis is our employees. And we make sure that they understand what we're doing, how we're doing it, what their role is in this process, what we want them to do, what we don't want them to do. That is really, really important. The last thing you need is for them to find it out in a newspaper article or in a CNN article or whatever that might be. And there's a timing thing, because once you say something to your employees, it can be leaked and it gets out, and especially, but you still have to bring your employees on first in almost everything. Then you have other stakeholders, like you have your funders, you have your current customers. If you're a larger company, you have customers that are at different levels. If you have a strategic accounts, they may be who you talk to first. They may even be part of the change. For instance, you may be implementing a new line of your product and you've been researching it and beta testing it with your strategic accounts, or you did a listening exercise and it's something they were really asking for and you told them, we're going to build this out because you asked for it. Sometimes you're going into communities that you want to embrace you, but you're doing something that you're building a concrete plant. The neighborhood might not like a concrete plant in their neighborhood. So your stakeholders there may be the neighbors, and you've got to talk to them and say why having a concrete plant here is safe, but also what are we going to do to be good neighbors?
Do you think it's common that people don't like change, even if it makes sense?
Oh, yes. We do not like change. What's the famous book, Who Moved My Cheese? We just as human beings generally do not like change. There's some that like it. They embrace it. They are antsy in their seat. They need change, but it's a comfort feeling, right? It's like that warm blanket. Even it's bad, you know that it's bad. You know what the situation is. When we're changing, we're asking people to do something different than their comfort zone. And the sooner that we can let them know that there's going to be a change and prepare for that change and let them know what's in it for them. Because the minute you tell me there's a change, my brain begins to say, well, how's that going to impact me? Okay, I'm going to have to leave earlier. Like just something like I moved the office, right? We've been a startup and we've been in this little co-working space, and now we're going to that next level where we're going to buy a building or we're going to rent a building that's going to have enough room for 100 people. And now I've been working at this co-working space that's really close to my house, and now I'm going to have to move. It can be something as simple as an office change. When you start to tell people that you're going to do that, they immediately say, I'm not going to shop there anymore because it's not close to my house. Or, man, that's another 30 minutes of commuting. So I'm going to have to drop my kids off earlier, or my husband's going to have to drop my kids off, or whatever. I mean, it's just little changes that you have to address, because the minute that you say there's a change, the mind of the person that you're talking to goes to, how's that going to impact me? And so you have to be prepared to address that, because when they start to think, how's that impacting me? They stop thinking about you. They stop thinking about the company. They stop thinking about what I need to do for the company or that I want to buy from the company. So you need to immediately address those things so you can get over those hurdles. So for instance, we're going to now start work at 9 versus 8:30 because we know that it's going to be a longer commute for our employees. We're going to have a little flex start time. We're going to have flex so you come in Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or whatever that is. But you need to think through, how is the change going to impact all of our stakeholders before you announce it, so that you can immediately go to those objections and make everybody feel comfortable so that they can start thinking about the process of, how am I going to move my office? The things that are their job, the things that are their piece. We're going to give you an extra coupon to keep coming here, or this space is going to be so much cooler, you're going to want to come here because we're going to be doing facials and massages while you're shopping. We have wine, or whatever that is to your customers. You've got to think through what's going to overcome their roadblocks and overcome them quickly, because you don't want to lose them with the change. You're asking them to change their behavior, most likely. So what's the motivation to change their behavior?
It shouldn't be a one-way communication oftentimes. No? It's
No.
always good to get some feedback and to react to that, and then together to build something.
Yeah, we do a lot of listening, and we encourage our clients that, to start a brand project, we'll listen. We'll listen internally and externally. We'll listen to a broad range of stakeholders. We do surveys, we do interviews, we do focus groups. We look at research that's already out there. We try to get as much data possible so that you're making the decisions. Sometimes we say when you're building a brand, your customers build your brand for you, because we listen to the customers and they'll say the words that you need to be saying back. This is where I see the value. Oh, wow, we didn't think about it that way. So that's the way we need to be telling our story, in the words of our customers. But you don't know that, and you don't know the decisions that you can make within your relationship with your customers if you don't talk to them. And I don't mean customers alone. I mean all of your stakeholders. You don't know what the work environment is until you talk to your employees.
Is this always the same story that you talk to different stakeholders, clients versus team members versus investors, for example?
We have to get the data somewhere. And depending on how mature the organization is, sometimes they've already done that. Sometimes we walk in and there's a brand and we're going to refresh it, and they've done some things that already are a starter. They've done exit interviews of clients. They've done client surveys. They do customer engagement. They do employee engagement surveys. So we have a lot of data But then we'll look at that data and say, where's the gaps? What's this data not telling us? For instance, if you did an employee engagement survey and 20% of your employees participated, you know that there's a lack of engagement with your employees, right? Or a fear that they don't want to tell you what they really think, or they don't believe you'll act upon it, or whatever that case may be. So we've got to get underneath it. And sometimes as a third party, people will talk to us at a different level as a third party. And so that way we can go talk to them and say, this is between you and me. We're going to take things back to the organization holistically. We're not taking things back to the organization saying, Bonnie said. So when you have those kinds of conversations, you get more authentic information that you can actually take back to leadership and make decisions. Sometimes also you ask your clients, how did that go? And they like you and they don't want to tell you the truth, right? Or they don't want to be confrontational. So they're like, oh yeah, it went okay, fine. But then you look at some data and they're not going to refer you and they're not going to renew their contract or whatever that might be. And you get in and you have a conversation as a third party and they say, yeah, I just didn't want to hurt Will's feelings because I really like him, but we're not going to sign another contract with them. They failed here, they failed here, they failed here. And also listening helps you make decisions like where you should be engaged in the community, where you should advocate, where you shouldn't advocate. What are some things that you should be doing that are moving your brand forward and are building trust and equity with your stakeholders?
I think many startups and decision makers, they prioritize everything as important in their branding. So they say, okay, we want to keep all our clients and we want to keep all our target audience, and we want to be fast, great, ecological, and this and that. But that's not possible. You cannot convey all the attributes that you want. You have to focus on one or couple of few, I guess.
Yeah, you can't be everything to everybody.
Yes.
And so you have to determine who is going to be most impactful in the future of your business. And so when you're making those decisions, you have to know, you have to have the data, you have to have the information. We use blue ocean strategy a lot of times with people. If your audience is familiar with blue ocean strategy, and if they're not, I would certainly encourage them to go find the book and read it. What that helps prioritize as well is what we're doing just making us the same and one of many. Are we just playing in the Me Too movement? Or are we prioritizing things that are going to differentiate us and make us look different and build a different kind of relationship with our stakeholders?
I love Blue Ocean strategy. It's so amazing. When I look at the marketplaces, if it's searching for freelancers or searching for products, everyone is trying to copy themselves. Everyone is so similar. And then if you are very specific, if you have a specific wish, then you suddenly can't find anyone suitable. But if you want to, like very general, there is way too much competition. And people could probably, if you are a freelancer startup or a big corporation, they could make their life so much simpler if they would focus on one really lucrative market niche. Especially the smaller you are, the probably more important it is. And then to be the best in this small niche. And from there, you can always grow.
We find that to be an issue a lot of times when companies come to the U.S. because the U.S. is so large and the marketplace is so large that you can't just go everywhere. And so looking at where those priorities, whether that niche be in the location that you're selling, so maybe you're just coming to Texas, or maybe you're just coming to the Northeast, or maybe you're going to sell in California or whatever that might be, starting small so that you build that reputation in that marketplace, and then you go to different markets. But also, what is that niche that you might want to focus on? And sometimes companies come from Europe and they sell all over Europe, and that's real easy for them to do. that you've got the euro, you've got a common language in some areas and that kind of thing. And so you've been in what you felt like was a larger market. And then you just say, oh, well, we're going to go to the US and we're going to go all over the US. And they just don't have the money or the funding to do that. So being niche and kind of seeing where can you stand out and what marketplace you like to go to is a better way to start than trying to be something for everyone.
Do you have some user cases from your past, interesting user cases where they didn't have a strong brand, strong reputation, and how you changed it and what was the result? You don't even need to say their names if it's not allowed.
No, I mean, I'll just give some examples. Some times that I think brands really need to be refreshed or worked on is when a company has grown very, very rapidly and they've kind of lost their way. They've gone from a startup to a growth acceleration company. We see breakdowns at about 75 employees of communication and brand and culture. We'll see it again around 150 to 200 employees. We'll see it again around 250 to 500, depending on how fast they're growing. And then you'll see it again at 1,000. And the reason for that is you're hiring a lot more people, you're hiring them very rapidly, and you're hiring mid-level managers. So you go from a time where there were 100 employees and the C-level all had their door open and you could go, a memo came out and said, we're doing this. And you could say, I don't understand this. So you go knock on the CEO's door and say, I don't understand this memo. When you get to that 75-ish, you've hired a few mid-level managers. And so now there's a protocol. I got to go talk to the mid-level manager. Well, does the mid-level manager understand? Do they understand the why and not just the how or not just the do, but the why and the how and all of that? Or do they just say, yes, we're going to do that and let's go and start immediately processing that this is what I've got to do to make it? So you have all of these breakdowns in culture, in brand, promise, delivery. So we look at all of those areas. That's one of the things that I think is often a time that we would come in. Another time is you have new leadership. And the leadership has been hired to take the organization to a new level, to transform something, right? And so there's an opportunity there. Also, when you've come out of a crisis, and so that you're now trying to build reputation and brand and trust all over again because maybe you lost that during the crisis. On the other side, which is kind of why we got into it, because early on, we did a lot of crisis management work. And we determined that many companies weren't prepared for crisis, not just didn't have a crisis plan, but they didn't have brand equity with their customers. They didn't have trust. They didn't have the benefit of the doubt with their customers. So therefore, when they had a crisis, the trust was totally drained and you had to build from scratch. Whereas if you did things right from the beginning and you built that reputation and that brand, when you did have a hiccup, when you did have a crisis, they would give you the benefit of the doubt. And if you handle the crisis well, in some cases, you could come out above. And we've found that over and over with our customers. We've found customers that we've done that with and built the brand that actually came ahead of the competition after a crisis because they had built that brand equity and that trust. And then when they handled the crisis well, they had more trust and more belief in them. We also have seen where you've had the opportunity to accelerate and grow, and a crisis came along and you rebounded quicker from that perspective. Another time we see change management and change in organizations as being reputational risks. Do you put good strategies around your change management? And do you communicate and do you listen and do you bring all of your stakeholders along through the change? That's pretty important. And that helps insulate your brand and your reputation. And then a merger and acquisitions are always reputational challenges. We've seen companies that acquired a company with a lot of brand baggage, a lot of reputational risks that they didn't recognize. They didn't do that kind of due diligence. And so they brought them together and they tried to make these cultures match, and they're just won't. And the whole reason that you brought the two companies together is not working. It's holding back. It may not work at all. You may divest that company later on. So we've kind of done all of that. Our goal is to help CEOs and leaders make the right decisions in how they're communicating, how they're changing, how they're building their brand, and how they're doing reputational risk analysis to build that equity and that trust so that they can make decisions and change and accelerate as they need to in the life cycle of their business.
What are the most common problems you face and challenges with your clients?
I think probably the biggest challenges we face are just how fast companies are moving and the priorities of the dollar or the money, the currency. Stakeholders, shareholders, depending on where the company is, founders, you start to look at the numbers. You start to look at quarterly performance. And all of that becomes really important. And you get very focused on lead gen and sales and things like that. And you have a tendency to forget that having a good brand and a good reputation accelerates lead gen, accelerates sales. The other challenge we find is that they look at brand and reputation as being a marketing initiative. And although I have a lot of experience in marketing and love marketing, it's a higher level. Reputation and brand is at the C level. That's who owns reputation and brand. And getting them, the C level, to focus on that, sometimes they have to have a reputational impact or a crisis to see that there was value there. And I hate that sometimes that happens, that we're called in to fix something after a crisis has happened, and let's build brand equity now. Let's build reputation now, which is much harder than if you'd done it when you were clicking on all cylinders.
That's so true. I see it, especially with bigger corporations, but also with startups. They oftentimes focus too short term and just looking at the numbers, but not only the sales and marketing can improve the sale, like the revenue, but also the whole big picture. And maybe this investment will take a few months or maybe longer, several months time to increase the revenue, but it's really can bring it to the next level compared to just trying to optimize every single part of the marketing.
We work a lot with CFOs, and CFOs, their job is to create value in the organization. And we think that's pretty funny because we think our job is to create value in the organization. But when you have an opportunity to work side by side with a CFO and a CEO that are trying to create value for the organization, and you can show them how brand and reputation and culture are creating value for the company as well. It's a little more intangible, but it allows them to be more successful when it's done right and to make the right decisions. It allows them to be more successful in that. It's kind of funny when CFOs recognize that. Sometimes they're the people who hire us because they have the problem. They know that there is a challenge with creating value in their organization because they have a reputational issue, or they're not delivering on the brand, or their culture is not aligned, or communication is not working internally and externally, or they've got a big change happening, but nobody's wanting to change and it's failed 3 times. So a lot of times that's who we're called in for. I like it when I'm partnering with the CFO at the beginning so that they're not already in crisis when we're called in.
Hey, it's interesting. You mentioned several times after the crisis they hire you, but not during the crisis, because probably they have totally different priorities during the crisis.
Right, right.
You mentioned AI before. How does it change your work?
AI is going to change everyone's work. And so I think it's kind of important to think about what your world is going to be like in an AI enabled world. And the sooner you begin to think about that, the better. Certainly there are tools for us to use, but if you get focused on the tools, you will miss the strategy and you will miss how you're going to change and make your organization competitive. And it's back to that brand and reputation and making those decisions for your stakeholders. How are you strategically looking at it? So we're doing the same thing that we're asking our customers to do. We're visioning. We're going through a vision of what does Reputation Lighthouse look like in an AI-enabled world? And where can we be more competitive? What's responsible look like? Where can we do more for our clients because we have the tools? What gaps do we have in our organization? That kind of thing. Then we're going to look at our readiness. One is budget. When you're looking at AI, it's not inexpensive, right? Then you've got all the governance of the privacy and protection and all of that. Then how do you plan for it and put a strategy together? How do you select? How do you test and prepare? Then you implement, then you evaluate and measure, then you grow. It's a whole process. What we're having now is we're having organizations that are just testing. Oh, that sounds fun. Let me test it. Oh, that sounds fun. Let me test it. And, oh, I can make a video really quickly. I can take my written word and turn it into a podcast. I can use my voice and do other things with my voice when I don't have to, so that you won't hear all my ahs and uhs and everything else, because AI will leave those out. So there's a lot of things that we're doing. And within larger corporations, you've got a lot of shadow AI going on, which is putting your organization at risk. From an AI perspective, we're not so much about the tools, because the tools are changing every day. We're more about where can we serve our clients better? How can we move faster? How can we serve more clients? How can we be more strategic for our organization? And then what are those priorities within our budget? And so that's kind of what we're looking at. We're toying with, certainly we've been using ChatGPT and Copilot and everything else. And we're creating pictures with Dolly, and Grammarly is telling me all the editing that I need to do, and Canva has it built in. And I'm looking at other things like Elevate Labs and looking at taking some of my reputation. I do a responsible AI minute every Friday on my LinkedIn, and I'm looking at, do I translate that into a little small podcast? There are things that I'm looking at, but the bottom line is you're toying with them to learn, because learning is important. But also you've got to understand, how is this going to impact my organization long term? And what is my company going to look like as an AI enabled company? And how are my stakeholders going to respond? One of the things we're finding is we're all looking internally at our organization and saying, oh, AI, 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 AI. It's like these shiny objects. Woo, 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 exciting. But our stakeholders, our buyers, our customers are so far away from being able to even accept that I would provide that to them in that way, that there's this huge education. And when you start to think about how wonderful AI is and how great it's going to be, and then you think about, are my customers ready and are they going to accept it? There's a huge gap that you have to think about, how are you going to close? But it can make us much more efficient. We need to make sure when it is making us more efficient that it's also not putting us at risk. There's going to be a lot of companies who went for efficiency and are going to be out of business because they forgot that they were breaking laws, that they're going to get huge fines from GDPR because things that they always had buttoned up, they don't have buttoned up anymore because now they're using AI. They're going to make false claims. They're going to spread disinformation. They're going to do a lot of things that are going to put them in risk and crisis. And there's going to be organizations that will not be here anymore because they looked at the shiny objects and didn't protect their reputation and their risks.
I had really bad experience with so many support chatbots, like from Vodafone. I wanted just to have a human being, and those support chatbots, they are so simple. And I was really frustrated that I couldn't have a human being to talk to.
Right. And pretty soon you will have a chatbot, but you won't recognize that it's not a human being. It's going to get really close, and some are getting very good. But that's a good point of what are you asking it to do? There's a hierarchy that says if the work you're doing is just good enough, it's just good enough. Whatever I do, just get it done. It's just good enough. It's not that important. Then that might be a good place to start with AI. If it needs to be pretty good, then you probably got a higher hybrid model. Maybe you start with AI, then you test it and get some rigor of where did it get its information and all that stuff. You edit it. But by the time it gets to this top part where it has to be excellent, AI is not ready for that. That's where we're going to spend more of our time, is at the very top of that triangle of what has to be excellent. What needs strategic thinking? What do we need more and more time to think on? So the more we can use AI to get us to where we have more time to do that, to analyze, to be strategic, to plan, to make good decisions. That's kind of, if you talk to startups, that's a problem, right? They're all down here in the weeds, but they need to get up here because what they're doing today is not as important, but they've got to be thinking about what they're doing in 6 months, in 18 months, in 3 years. And you can't have the time to think about those things and to much less implement them if you're making sure the code's right in your software.
Too many founders, especially, they are working too much in their startup and not on their startup. They have to put the strategical hat, the CEO, CFO hat, and think long-term and think about like from the bird perspective, not only from the frog perspective.
I have a peer and very good friend who always says, and I have to remind myself of this very often, because I'm an entrepreneur. I'm not a startup anymore, but 20 years in business. But I still have to remind myself this: what can only I do? And as a founder of a company, you need to write that down somewhere so that you can see it, put it on your desktop of your computer, put it on a bulletin board or whatever, because you need, even at 20 years in business, I still have to remind myself, what can only I do? Because that's where I need to be spending my time. I have a team of people that are excellent and can do things a lot better than I can. And when I get in the weeds and begin to tell them what they should do and how they should do it, I need to look back and say, I hired them for their expertise. I should let them do it. And is that even what I do best? No. So what do I do best? Then that's where I should be spending my time. What can only I do? And that's, if I were to leave entrepreneurs with something, put that on a Post-it and look at it every day.
That's so great. Such a great advice. I also have been doing it for many, many years, over 15 years. And still, sometimes you are in this hamster wheel and you don't breathe. You just work one task after another. And then you realize that you spend so much energy and it's difficult to get to the next level. You can stay on the same level if you do that, and you burn out after a while if you're if you have to juggle so many things as an entrepreneur. So it's a very valuable advice for entrepreneurs. Thank you so much, Bonnie. It was so many interesting information and knowledge. Yeah, some of our audience might be interested in working with you or listening to your LinkedIn sessions. How could they find you?
So on LinkedIn, I'm Bonnie Caver, just as on the screen. And my company's Reputation Lighthouse, and our website's replighthouse.com.
Amazing. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.